Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, sponsored by the IBCA. We are a global podcast that shares the passion for the coaching profession. You will hear the stories of coaches from all around the world. We are covering the profession in game, outside of the game, and anything in between. As always, thank you for listening. We look forward to sharing the coaches' stories with you.
On this episode of the After the Timeout podcast, we have Eric Kelly, head coach, Glenbard East boys basketball. Coach, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I appreciate you guys having me in. How you guys doing?
We're doing awesome. Besides the snow outside right now, it was 80 on Friday. I walked outside. It's crazy, but it's life in Chicago, right?
Yeah, that's right. You live here. That's what you sign up for, right?
Yep. So we start every episode with the opening tip, and we use it just to get to know you, get to know your program, let our listeners know kind of your path to where you are, anything about your program. Obviously, you guys, we just talked a little bit. You get as far as you wanted, but you had a really, really good year, and you have a really good program. So just kind of tell us a little bit about your journey, and then anything you want about your program and where you guys are going and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so, I don't want to go like long whole bio, but I'm a through and through Chicago guy. I'm born and raised Chicago, from the South Side. And I come from a basketball family. My dad is from the West Side, played at Farragut, one of the most, renowned programs in the city. One of their famous alums just won the state title this weekend, Ronnie Fields, Evan Garnett, Michael Wright, the list goes on and on. But he was a basketball guy, put the ball in my hands in like first grade. Then I had an older brother, 4 years older than me, who played. So, basketball was just kind of in my genes. So, I played at Morgan Park Academy High School, which whenever people hear I played at Morgan Park, say, "Oh yeah, Morgan Park, you guys are really good." I was like, "No, I was at the academy, which was private school. Two kids in my graduating class, and so wonder why my parents selected the school for me is because super big into academics, and so my dad always stressed how important that was basketball, but obviously that stops at a certain point, and so you gotta be able to provide for family and be a productive member of society. Going to that school is one of the best things for me because, average ACT score is like 32. Now did I get that? Nope, I brought that down a little bit. I only got 21. But, going to that school and, you're around other kids who are really smart and have their priorities in order, that rubs off on you. And so going to that school made college for me really easy. When I was at MPA, Morgan Park Academy, I was able to play varsity for 4 years, all conference 3 years. I was a player of the year my senior year. So decent career in high school, and I was able to play at Beloit College, which is about 90 miles north of Chicago. Played there. Decent experience. Got a degree there. Wasn't quite 100% sure if I wanted to go out and get a job immediately. So as I referenced before, I had an older brother who had at that time I graduating college was kind of getting into coaching. Been a mentor for me, and he's saying, Eric, if you're really not sure, maybe try to go get some more education. Then kind of figure it out. I was looking for somewhere after college where I could go, but not, have to pay. Kind of like a lot of people after college, you're not rolling in dough. So I was looking for somewhere where I can get a graduate, get my school paid for. So luckily, I was able to get to Indiana State in Terre Haute. Of course, Indiana State only known for one thing, Larry Bird, one of the greatest players NBA history, literally known for nothing else but that. I was able to go there. I was able to get a graduate assistantship there for my last 3 semesters there. So I had to pay for one semester, which, was fine. And so while I was there, that's when I actually got into coaching. Because when I'm down there, as you guys know, life is all about timing. One of the local high schools down there, Terre Haute South High School, they were coming off making it to semi-state, which is our state semifinals. And so, they were a program that was kind of in the rebuilding mode, had a lot of kids, not a ton of talent. So the coach was kind of looking to imp system to get everybody off, get everybody playing, have some fun, not really stress on winning so much. And so he wanted to run a system called the system. So what that is, you guys probably heard about it, from Loyola Marymount, well, maybe about 10 or 12 years ago. A kid from the school, Jack Taylor, scored 110 points. But what the system is, those guys, they get up and down the court, they sub 5 in, 5 out. And they really try to get up threes. They play 15 guys. They usually lead the country in scoring from a team standpoint. They usually put a guy in the top 2 or 3 as far as individual scoring, averaging 30 a game. And so the coach at Terre Haute South was looking to run that system, but wasn't 100% sure how to implement it. And so, luckily, and as I said, timing, playing at Beloit College, I played in the same conference as Grinnell. So we played those guys twice a year. And in my career, we actually had a winning record against Grinnell because my head coach did a great job preparing us for that. But I had a great idea about how that system worked because I played against it. And so I had a chance to connect with the coach down there, Mike Saylor. And like I said, he brought me on because I knew that system. And so we literally ran that Grinnell system my first year there at Terre Haute, to varying degrees of success. Luckily, we had a kid who could really shoot the ball and average 28 a game for us, end up playing at Eastern Illinois, Jay Smith. So that's kind of how I got into coaching right there at Terre Haute South. I spent 2 years there. Then when I was done, after my 2 years, came back home. My brother was just wrapping up his second year at Providence St. Mel High School, which is, historical school, state championship, 1985, Lowell Hamilton. They recently won a state title, which I helped is in the recent state title team I can kind of get to later. They won the title in 2019, but my brother was for a little help at Providence St. Mel. This is in 2007. So I went back, helped him. I was his assistant varsity coach for a couple years. Then I was, his freshman coach as well. After a couple years, we decided to move on. He decided to move on. He wanted to coach college, so he ended up coaching at North Central College in Naperville, Division III school, very good program. And so after that, I went from Providence St. Mel to, we had a school that was opening up on the south side, kind of a feeder school called Providence Inglewood. So I went on and ended up coaching middle school for about 7 years at Providence Inglewood, which is on 65th and Ashland in the city. Started off my first year there, I literally won no games. I went like 0-12 or 0-14, something like that. Building that program up, literally for my first couple of years there, to that first year where I went 0-12, I was like, I'm not going 0 for again. Not half program where we had, literally kindergarten through sixth grade kids come in on Saturday, Tuesday, Thursdays after school. And we literally did just like a ton of skill development and plan, get those kids some reps and get them experience. And so, long story short, my last couple of years there, really, really well. We won a lot of tournaments that went on in the city, like from 8th grade. And then as I referenced before, Providence St. Mel won the state title in 2019, and a couple of those starters that they had, I helped produce. They went to my school, Providence Inglewood, where we played a ton of games, gained a lot of experience. And so, that was really fun producing those guys, getting a chance to see them from, little like bitty ball all the way up to go to high school and win the state titles. So, it's real fun for me. So, after that, I've been at a couple different schools after St. Mel. I was at Stagg High School with Marty Struess, who everybody knows his brother, Max Struess, who's on the Cavs. They're doing pretty well this year. But I went from Stagg and had a chance to spend a couple years with Rob Brose at Bolingbrook, 2018 to 2020. Rob's, doing a great job there. He had a ton of talent, done a lot of winning. I learned a lot from him. I learned how to play fast and, learn how to, kind of really operate a program inside and out. So I went from Bolingbrook, Wabansie Valley. I was there for a couple years with Andrew Schweitzer, who's, still there now. Obviously, he's doing a terrific job. I learned how to play the ball press, learn how to play motion offense. So I learned quite a bit from him. Then after Wabansie, I spent the last 3 years at Glenbard East. And so that's kind of a snapshot of my journey.
It was interesting as you were talking about system and talking about Rob Brost. And we just recently had Vernal Turner on from Providence St. Mel back in the day. So as you and I kind of said off the air, there's just so many connections in the world of coaching. I wanted to go into your experience in Indiana because I think, you kind of talked about a little bit your experience at Terre Haute, but just what was that experience like in coaching in Indiana? We all know of the movie Hoosiers, but what was that experience really like coaching Indiana high school basketball?
Yeah, so everybody knows, Indiana basketball is like football down in the South, down in Alabama and Tennessee, and literally every gym we went in, there was never a game we went in where the gym wasn't at least 4/5 filled. And most of the gyms in Indiana are like complete spectacles. So as much as I love Chicago, I literally do miss Indiana for kind of the pageantry and how basketball means so much to everybody in those towns. And literally every Friday night and even on Tuesday nights when we play, like I said, gyms are darn near filled. And it just meant so much to those guys. And then I was there at a really special time just because of the talent that was in our conference. So at Terre Haute South, we played in a conference called the MIC. And in our conference, we had Lawrence North, and at the time, they arguably had the greatest high school team in Indiana history, which featured Greg Oden, Mike Conley, and then a host of other Division I kids. Then we also had North Central High School, which featured Eric Gordon, who, obviously still playing in the NBA, been in there for about 15 years, had a great career, went to IU. Also had a chance to go up against Carmel High School with Josh McRoberts, played at Duke, 6'10", could do it all, played in the NBA for a number of years. And literally every school in our conference, multiple Division I players. And so at Terre Haute South, we had one kid that went to Eastern Illinois, but it was just a murderer's row every night, like in the conference. And literally every week, our head coach, Mike Saylor, we would have conversations. He would say, man, how can we get out of this conference? This is too much for us. And it was overwhelming, but it was fun to go against that type of competition and then just see the caliber of players that, Indiana had, because that was obviously my first experience with Indiana basketball. And so, like I said, the gyms were great. The talent was great. And it was just good to see like high caliber basketball and be around that.
Yeah, that ain't no joke right there. Those are some really darn good high school players, not let alone, pros. Obviously Greg Odom got hurt, but that's no joke right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said,
Um,
Mike Conley, it was amazing.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, so I'm going to tweak this a little bit. You kind of told us about your journey and your coaching stops, along with some AAU stuff, right? You coach AAU as you're going along through that, right? And working with different people. What things are you taking away from those coaches? And then, looking back now, what are those things that you took from them to apply to your head coaching? You know what I mean? Like you're going different places. You're like, I like this. I don't like this. If at some point you probably decided, yeah, I want to be a head coach, right? So you're trying to get it all together when it comes to that time. So as you're going along, like I guess, how did you process that information? How did you figure out what you like to make it your own style, but also use those things when you got to the head coaching job?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Like I said, I've been a number of places, and I think that's definitely beneficial because you need to see different styles and see how things are done in different ways, and then kind of figure out how, yeah, like you said, how you want to make it into your own. And so, like, yeah, I did coach AAU for 12 years with Full Package Athletics. Guy by the name of Steve Pratt, who's known all throughout the basketball community. But one of the things I got from Full Package is, communication. And so they really stress with us coaches, especially since we would work with different teams, making sure that we're openly communicating with our parents on a, regular basis. And so that's the way that's kind of manifested itself to me now. Like weekly, I send out emails to my whole program about, practice schedules, things that's happening for the week, things that the parents need to be abreast of. And so just having that constant and then two-way communication, that's something I got from Full Package. Like I said, something I got from, coaching at Providence St. Mail is, to be appreciative of everything you have. Because, at St. Mail, inner city school, I mean, we literally only had 4 rims, period, in the school, compared to you look at places like a Glenbrook North or a Lake Forest, places out there in the north suburbs. They've got resources upon resources. And so, whenever like during the year, we would have situations at our school where, oh, we couldn't use our big gym because the girls have to use it, or we couldn't use this because somebody else had to use it. And so I always just think back to like, man, I could be at St. Mel where we only had 4 freaking rims. And so, we still have a gym. We still got 6, 7 baskets. We're good. So I'm not going to harp on, not being able to use our main gym because the girls have to use it. So what? So, I learned, always be appreciative because there's always, people always in worse situations as you. Um, you know, being at Bolingbrook with Rob Bros, like I said, really fun. Number one thing I got from him is just, playing to the personnel, playing fast, and letting the kids, kind of figure things out themselves, and also empowering coaches. Anybody who's seen a Bolingbrook game the last probably 7, 8 years knows, even though we got that shot clock coming soon, shot clock's not going to affect Bolingbrook when it comes to the first 3 years because they get the ball up and down the court. And so, the way, we want to play at Glenbard East, I want to get up and down the court too, because, kids, they want to get up and down the court. That's a fun way to play, get up shots, give kids freedom, let kids kind of figure things out because, at the end of the day, kids are still young when it comes to their basketball career, so they're not going to know it all. So you kind of got to let them figure it out. And I do that with my players, and we do coach them up, but we allow them to make mistakes, and that's one thing I really hate when I see some kids getting pulled for one mistake and then they come to the bench and, you're really killing their confidence. And I just 100% don't believe in that at all. So, if a kid does make the same mistake 2, 3 times, then, we'll have a conversation. But one mistake is, that's basketball. The ball's going to go up and down the court. everybody's going to take shots. You miss a shot, you don't mean to miss the shot. You just shot it a little bit to the left or to the right. And so it is what it is. I'll tell my kids, you miss 2 or 3 in a row, I want you super thirsty to shoot the next one. So, I want to empower guys, which, Bros did at Bolingbrook. Another thing he did is also empowering his assistant coaches. I was literally like the fourth assistant over there when I was at Bolingbrook. But when we went in the locker room, halftime, after the game, I got a chance to talk and I got a chance to be heard. Our second, third assistants also had a chance to talk. And so he really empowered us and let us, feel like we were a part of things. And so I try to do that with my assistants too. There are parts of practice, I'll just sit back and I allow my assistant to, kind of, run things, even though, we have our conversations before about what we want done. But, I kind of sit back and let him do his thing. And, that's probably 2 things I got most from Bolingbrook. And like, I definitely apply that now when I'm at Glenbard East.
So an interesting question we ask quite often, and we've gotten feedback that coaches that listen really like. So obviously you were an assistant at multiple programs as you discussed, but when you were applying and deciding to be a head coach, and obviously Glenbard East was of interest to you, but how did you know it was the right fit? What were you exactly looking for? And maybe some advice from you to a young assistant who's looking to be a head coach for that first time. Like, how did you know Glenbard East was the right fit for you?
Yeah, well, it's not just a basketball thing. It's the whole entire school. The principal, the administration, athletic director, even, teachers and other coaches too. So you get a chance when you're in there to meet those individuals and you get a chance to see, like, do you mesh well with them? Do you connect with them? And so, our athletic director, which, he's been there every year. I've been there, Dwayne Bates, really great guy. If the name rings a bell, he's a former Chicago Bear, played with the Northwestern Wildcats. He was on, the Rose Bowl team back in '95. But, real cool, calm, collective guy, laid back, tells you things, how it is, but, very comforting and, very helpful and, just really connected with him. Our personalities are pretty similar. And so, like I said, if you go to any school, everything's got to match up top to bottom, administration down to the kids. So he was great. Our principal, Twan Anderson, who had been at the school, not just as a principal, but as a dean, really connected with the school. And I think that's really important when you're going into a school is, going into an establishment that's already established. And so where you already know what the framework of everything is, how the school is going to operate. And it's not something that's brand new where you're having to guess what's going to be what. So you already know what everything is because that principal's already laid the foundation for everything. So you don't have to guess. And so, looking at principal, looking at AD, then, like I said, other coaches too who had been around the school. We've got a great football coach, John Walters, who's been there for, I think this is his 14th year. And so getting a chance to talk with him, understand once again what the framework of athletics is at Glenbard East and how, administration is, supportive and it's not anti-athletics, which unfortunately some schools can be like, or at least not 100% supportive. And so all those supportive aspects, were really, really attractive. And so, and then talking with the students, the student athletes, were really good guys that came from, good families, and they really love basketball. You really want to be around people who love basketball. And so that just really helps and made things really easy.
So, here's kind of the question that every coach has, right? Like you make your transition, you play basketball your whole life, you play in college, right? Then you said, you talked about, oh, I have an opportunity to get into coaching, right? I guess we'll make it a 2-part question. Like, what were some of the things you didn't realize you were ready for when you first got into coaching? And then maybe take it to when you got your first head coaching job. What was that like, man moment, right? Like, welcome to head coaching moment or coaching moment that you had early in your career, and then when you got your first head coaching job.
Yeah. So, like you said, man, I spent quite a few years as an assistant, and when you make that move from right to left over to that first seat, when you're over in that right seat, you don't have to respond to everything that goes on. Like you can kind of sit back and you can make a suggestion or you can think about it, or you may not even know the answers. And if you don't know the answers, it's okay as the assistant if you don't, because that's the head coach's job. So, you don't have to respond to every single thing. But when you make that move over to the left, like you have to have a response to everything. And honestly, like every coach can't say they actually do, but you got to act like you do. And so, knowing when to call that timeout, when to, make those substitutions, and, when to make this call and that call. And so that's when I think where, as a head coach, what I've really relied upon is, having the quality assistants and trying to delegate things to do, because I think it's Steve Jobs who said, I'm not going to hire smart people and tell them what to do. I hire smart people so they can tell me what to do. So, I've been fortunate enough to have some good assistants here. And, before the games, I try to go over different scenarios. Okay, this guy gets in foul trouble. Who are we going with? If that kid gets hot, who are we putting on him? If this play isn't working, or if we can't run this, then what's the next thing we're going to go to? So we played out all those scenarios, and I, like I said, I try to really trust my assistants and then trust the work that I've done before. And so I think as a head coach, I try to do so much work beforehand and try to, pregame it and get ahead of so many things, compared to when you're sitting on the right. You still are going to be prepared, but you're not as prepared than when you have to stand up and you're that guy the whole game. So I think the sense of preparation is so much greater. And then just the relationships and understanding the players too, and understanding, what situations you're able to put them in, what situations you're able to have them in where they can succeed, which is the most important thing, because, you want to put kids in a position to be successful. I just think, like I said, the preparation has been a lot greater for myself. And, the time that I'm putting in is so much more. And so that's been, the big adjustment, going from, being that assistant, like literally as being third, fourth assistant at Bolingbrook, to being the top assistant, to being the head guy.
I tell my head coach all the time, I'll give him my opinion, but I go, that's what you get paid the big bucks for, right?
Yeah. You got to ultimately make it, and you got to live and die with what you decide.
So, halfway point here, we'll call this halftime adjustments. And I think this is a perfect time, to talk about like evaluating your season, right? Reality of it is there's very few teams, there's two teams that get to end the year in high school on a win, right? Whether it be third place or winning the state championship. So, with so many high schools, a lot of seasons are coming to an end. So your season comes to an end. Obviously, you probably take some time, just get away from it, reflect. But now, as coaches do, probably within a short period of time, you're like, all right, we got to get in the next year mode, right? So how do you go about like evaluating, your past season, kind of, okay, what's missing? Where's a hole? We had something, now who's leaving, getting into next season, all that stuff that goes into preparing for summer, which comes up quicker than everybody thinks, and you got to be ready to go and start planting the seeds for the next year.
I'll start it the next day. I know everybody says take time. I think if you're a competitor, I don't need time off. I don't need time off. I'm going right the next day. So literally the next day, what I did is, I'm looking at our schedule for next year. I'm thinking about, who we're going to possibly add, who we're going to drop. And then honestly, everything starts and ends with personnel. I mean, that's why you see kids transferring. That's why you see movement. It's all about, what kids you have. And so, I'm looking at my roster. We were fortunate enough this year. We had 13 kids, only 3 seniors. We only had 1 senior who played. So, 10 kids who hypothetically can return. But as coaches, you guys know, things happen all the time. Kids move, kids decide they don't want to play. I just had this week a kid come into my office and say, oh, that his mom is moving. And so they're probably transferring. So, I had 10 kids who were juniors, probably 7 or 8 of them come back. So I look at my roster and rank the kids like, my top kids to bottom, and who are going to likely be my top kids coming back from varsity. Then I'm looking at my sophomore roster. First couple weeks, my rule, what I usually do between end of the season and then spring break, which we got spring break coming up in 2 weeks, I meet with every kid in our program, and I just get a gauge on, how they felt this year went for an individual standpoint and a team standpoint. I want to get their feelings about things, because how kids feel is how they're going to play. And I want kids playing confidently. I want kids believing in me. Most importantly, I want kids believing in themselves. That way you can get the most out of them. A couple things I've done, 3 things. Like I said, I met with my kids, looked at the schedule, and then I go through and watch every tape of every game we played this year. I went through 4 games so far, so I'm starting our 5th game probably when we get off this podcast. I'll start on that. And I'm just looking at, things that we ran, how much success did we actually have with it from an offensive standpoint, defensive standpoint. We like to think as coaches, we come up with these great schemes, and then you see it on film and it was, didn't work. And so you've got to not have an ego and say, man, okay, we can't do this. It just doesn't work. And so, I'm looking at the things we ran, and some of the things I'll keep, some of the things I'll scrap. And just like I said, I think the deep dive internally into what you are and what you can be, you've got to be realistic. There's some things that I tried that didn't quite work. There's some things that I tried that did work and we probably should have did more of. So like I said, I'm going to wrap up our meetings next week. I believe I have 4 more kids in the program I've got to meet with next week. I'm almost done with our schedules. Like I said, I think we'll be pretty good next year. So, I'm trying to really ramp up our schedule because, I want to be playing hopefully, a little bit farther than what we did this year. In order to do that, got to play a challenging schedule. And that starts in the summer. I'm done with our summer schedule, made that. That was literally one of the next things I did 2 days after our season ended is get that summer schedule together. And so honestly, I'm ready for the summer. I'm ready to get going, because I'm expecting us to do some pretty good things next year.
I don't think people realize how crazy us coaches are. I did the same thing. Day we ended, next day I sent my coach a text. Hey, what about this? What about this? Let's look at this. Let's look at that.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're
Uh,
competitive. You're competitive.
So I do, as we change, I want to focus on, and we've never, I don't think, in all of our episodes over 7 seasons, focused on this specific topic, which is the adjustments as a head coach you make between that first and second year. I remember what my first year was like, and I remember what my second year was like, and they were, Todd could tell you, vastly different. I want to start with you personally. You guys were 13 and 17 your first year. And then this past year, you were 21 and 11. But I'm curious, you personally, what did you learn about yourself, maybe as a head coach, as a leader, and kind of those reflections you made personally about yourself?
Okay. This is actually, I just wrapped my 3rd year at East. Wrapped my
Excuse
third.
me.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yes, I'm from your second to your third.
Yeah. So, those main adjustments I made was, making sure I was really, tailoring things to our personnel. I think a lot of times as coaches, it's a great thing and a bad thing where, online, you look online and there's so many resources about different things you can do, so many things that you see other high schools or colleges doing from a schematic standpoint that they look so good and, you can teach it and it works, but your kids can't do it. Kids can't do it. And so you've got to understand like your kids inside and out, their skills, and I think most importantly, their experience. And so what I really tried to do was I had to really like literally figure out my kids' experience. And when I say that, I'm asking like, when did you start playing basketball? Because literally I have some kids who, yeah, traditionally you think most high school varsity level kids, hey, they played in like started playing second, 3rd grade. And I figured out, man, I got some kids who just started playing in 8th grade, or some kids who just started playing before freshman year. So because of that, their experience is so limited and feel for the game is so lacking. So some things that you would expect them to be able to do, they can't, and you know why they can't because they don't have that experience. So really understanding them, where they're coming from, and then okay, oh, that's why they didn't do this. That's why they didn't do that. So really understanding them and then also understanding, your coaches as well and what they can and cannot do and comfort level and just putting people in a position to be successful. I think we people take for granted and we don't understand, where everybody's coming from. And everybody's coming from different points. And so that's kind of why I'm on here. You guys are trying to talk to me and figure out where I'm coming from. And as coaches, we got to know our kids and we got to know our coaches, where they're coming from and try to put them in a position to succeed. So that's one thing I really did is did a deep dive, and then I really thoroughly tried to match up, those experiences and what they can do with schematically some things we can do where we weren't overwhelming guys and putting them in positions where they felt overwhelmed or they could not do things. And I think that's really important because, like I said, as coaches, we get so caught up in things that we want to do, things that we like. And to be honest, it doesn't matter what we like. It doesn't matter that what we see, what's good. It matters what works for the kids. Because if the kids can't do it, it doesn't matter. So really understanding what they can do and things that can mesh with them, that really helped, particularly this year. Cause I literally like switched up some like a big part of our offense and what we did, due to some personnel. And it really helped us.
I'm interested as a follow. You kind of talked about, and we hear coaches all the time talk about creating their system around their personnel. But you had mentioned, which I found was interesting, you had mentioned morphing some things and understanding your assistants' strengths and weaknesses. Can you maybe go a little bit into that for coaches out there, maybe trying to help them evaluate their assistant's strengths and weaknesses and assigning tasks to them based on those?
Yeah, so I think that comes from, first of all, understanding your kids and like what they respond to best. Maybe you have that coach who's the yeller and go get them, and then the coach who's maybe the more kind of chill, laid back guy. And obviously, you want to put your kids with a coach where, they are going to mesh and the communication styles are going to match. And so they can get the most out of them. And so when you understand the kids first, and then, like I said, understanding the assistants, understanding what they work with best, and like I said, thoroughly understanding their history, because hey, maybe they've worked in this situation before and they had success, and then they worked in another particular situation with another group of kids and didn't have success. And so, just understanding, my coaches, and I literally had to make a coaching change a couple of weeks before the season. And it worked out pretty well. But like I said, I just sat down, had those conversations with them and asked them, okay, where do you feel comfortable? And then at the end of the day, asking, okay, I think, or asking them or telling them, hey, I think you would be best with this group. Why would you be best for this group? Because these kids, in my conversations with them, they say that they respond best to this type of coaching. They say they respond to that type of coaching. So because they respond well to, your particular type, I think you would work well with them. And so, that's how I was able to kind of move some guys around, because at the end of the day, I put the kids first because that's what matters. If you put the kids first and the kids' needs, and that kind of, and where I get that from is being a teacher, because I've been a teacher for 16 years, and as a teacher, it's all about students first and what works for them. And so I think any really good coach is a good teacher and vice versa. And so when you marry those two, of the best thing for the coach, best thing for the student, that's how I got to putting coaches where they are and putting kids in the best position to succeed.
Well, I think that's such an important function there of, we do something like that too at the beginning of the year. We're asking our kids, how do you want to be coached? How do you respond to coaching, right? We have some kids who are like, yeah, coach, you can give it to me and then I'll get going, right? Like I was one of those kids. You yelled at me, I might not have liked it, but I took it as, oh, I'm going to show you and I'm going to do it, right? Some kids, don't respond that way, and that's a big part of coaching too, to get the most out of your kids. So you mentioned, the changes you made, and obviously personnel goes into it. But I wanted to take a little deeper dive on like what maybe it's stats or types of shots or whatever you're looking at when you're watching that film, right? To say, okay, this worked and this didn't. For example, like I'm going back and like kind of grading all of our shots this year, right? Okay, this is a good shot according to like how we like our shots, and we talk about it all the time, right, through the season. And then I'm going to kind of follow it is, okay, what created that shot? You know what I mean? So it's not necessarily a matter of you make or miss. We got a good shot on that out of this action. So how do you kind of look at it to, instead of just, the eye test of this worked and this didn't? Obviously, some things don't work, some things don't, but like having a little bit more information on, this, maybe this is working. We just need to get better at this skill, or this just didn't work because the numbers show it, or whatever it may be. What is your like kind of criteria to make those changes?
Sure. So, first of all, we have a scale that we use, shot quality of 1 to 10, with tens being, wide open right hand layups, a nine being a, wide open shot from a three, a one is like, a fadeaway with the hand in the face,
Right,
falling out
right.
of bounds, something like that. So, look at every kid, grade all their shot quality. And we'll do this in film where, we're all watching our film, and, I let the kids do the talking. I'm like, okay, stop it right there. What shot is this? And then um we'll come back and we'll watch a little bit, and then at the end of the day I'll show them their numbers, their total, as far as, okay, today you had a 88, today you had a 78. Obviously the highest number the better. And so obviously we're looking for the highest score, because they're taking the best shots. Now how are they getting those shots? And so that's something that I'm also in the process of doing right now in that all-season plan between now and spring break, to see like who grades out with the highest shot quality. Luckily for us, I'm around some kids who are not selfish. And to be honest, I got some kids who need to be more selfish because they're pretty good and we need them taking 20 shots, 15 shots a game. And so we look at that shot quality, and then we look at that with each of, the different things we like to do on offense. And so which things are we doing are yielding the highest scores? So if I got this particular thing that we're doing and it's yielding a low score, okay, why is it yielding a low score? Because we got the data, but then we look at the why. Like you said, want to look at the why. Was it because, oh, we weren't being patient enough? Oh, we didn't let it run all the way through. So we look at those numbers and look at the whys. Once I get that, then that'll tell me. And just looking at it, like I said, through the first couple games, I've been through our first 4 games and looking at it, and I've already figured out one thing, like we dribble the ball entirely too much. But those things will help me kind of dictate, where we'll go and what type of plan I'll start to form in May. Because usually when I get to the month of May, that's when I really start mapping out, what our June is going to look like from, our contact days and when we have our summer camp. So that's how I kind of look at it, like I said, and just really digging into the why we, took particular shots, why we got those shots. Maybe we got them because, we played against some really good length and athleticism. Maybe we didn't get those shots, or we got them because, the kids we were playing against, the personnel didn't allow it. So there are factors that go into that, and I think you have to consider those things because your opponents, they kind of dictate what you can do and what you can't do.
So, as you're making these decisions and you're going for your 3 years as a head coach, we talk to a lot of coaches about the idea of having mentors and having people you lean on and having people you go to. Kind of as you did your journey as a head coach from your first year to your second year to your third year, and you've improved each year immensely, which is tremendous. Kind of who are some of those people you leaned on? Maybe what are some of those lessons you've learned?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, to be honest, it's been like 3 guys particularly who I go to who are helpful. First and foremost, been my brother, as I mentioned. He was a high school coach for a few years, and he coached college, and he had success at college. And so, I talk to him a couple times a week about what we're doing and things that we could do. So I've always had him in my corner. Another guy that I went to, coach who's doing really well, head coach of St. Ignatius, Matt Monroe. I had a chance to coach with him at Full Package Athletics for a couple summers. I know he was at St. Pat's for a long time. And so obviously, he's under that Mike Bailey coaching tree that goes on and on and on. Obviously, Gene Heinkamp this weekend winning the state title. And I think Matt, he's obviously, since he's been at St. Ignatius, they've done a tremendous job, from getting downstate 2 years in a row, and his program is one that's well respected. So when I first got this job, he's one of the first people I contacted, and he gave me a boatload of information that was super helpful. And so, he's one of my favorites, and he's, has been so helpful for me. And then the next guy is honest. He's a mentor, even though he's literally a year younger than me. But it's a guy I went to Indiana State with, a guy by the name of Chris Buggs, who is he's the head coach at Gary Westside in Gary, Indiana. And like I said, we went to Indiana State together, and we both coached at Terre Haute South. But the reason he's kind of a mentor for me is because he's been a head coach for longer than me. He just wrapped up his 9th season at Gary Westside, and he's had a lot of success over there. He went to semi-state a couple of years ago. He had a kid by the name of Jalen Washington, who's on University of North Carolina right now. But I literally call him after every game we play, and I just talk about things that we did well or we didn't do. And he's been tremendous for me as far as like somebody to talk to. Every coach needs somebody that be a soapbox with, and so he's been that guy with me. He's been really helpful. And so those are the 3 guys. Like I said, my brother, Matt Monroe, and then Chris Buggs. So the things I've gotten from my brother is just understanding big picture things, and understanding, like as I kind of went to before, tailoring what you're doing to your kids, and you can't do certain things if you don't have certain kids. And Matt Monroe has just been really huge on just details and culture, and doing things the right way and doing things for the kids, and just so much information and valuable. And then the thing I've gotten from Chris is we always kind of always talk about our Terre Haute days and just talk about things that we learned from our coach Saylor, and just making sure we're doing things for the right reasons and doing things for the kids, and just always keeping that big picture thing in mind.
All right, so kind of I guess a big picture question. After 3 years, right? You're
Yep.
building it, you kind of gone a step by step, right? And this doesn't have to be necessarily on the court, right? It could be program wise, it could be, community wise, whatever. What are you kind of looking to do going forward? Kind of what's your next step, or something you want to add to your program, or maybe help grow a little bit more?
Sure. We want to, like I said, we want to get Glenbard East, more known in our community, more, we want to get that fan support up. we also want to make Glenbard East, a basketball name. I'm sure every coach always says that, but when you talk about those programs in Illinois, which people always talk about, like Matt Monroe's got St. Ignatius to that point, obviously you have your Kenwoods and your Bolingbrookes of the world. I think we're a ways from there, but next year, it's my goal to get us out in, those shootouts, which we're already in a few, but we want to get us out and playing those top-notch teams and get our kids and get our program exposed to, that high level Illinois high school basketball. Because if you're going to be good, if you're going to be competing, winning sectionals and hopefully getting downstate, you got to play against good teams. So, we don't want to just see good teams when we get to the playoffs. We need to see them first and foremost. You actually got to see them in the summer. And so, the last couple summers, we put our guys in some of the top shootouts so they get a chance to see those guys. And now this year coming up, I think this is a year we can feel good about, okay, now we need to put them in front of these teams, the Downers Grove Norths of the world, the Bennett's of the world. We got to put our kids in front of those kids in the regular season so that, we know what that high level basketball looks like in the regular season. Because like I said, we want to be playing in March. I think next year we will be pretty good. But that's the goal, putting our kids in those situations. And then also, want to be a little bit more of a presence in the community. We did a little bit of that this year, getting out to some schools, but we want to be, totally out in Lombard, having the whole community coming out to our games. We're going to have a lot of Friday night games this year at home. So we want to make sure we're literally packing those places every Friday night and getting that support and making Lombard, the greater Lombard community, proud of what we're doing.
So as we get into our last two segments, the first one we called 30-second timeout. It's kind of your platform to discuss whatever you want about yourself or your program or something you want our listeners to know, or turn the table and ask Todd and I a question. Kind of the floor is yours.
Yeah. So, obviously looking this weekend, I'm, big basketball guy, and, I'm watching the state finals. And I know one thing that a lot of people are looking for. Most people are looking forward to it, and some people not so much, maybe cringing. And that's the shot clock. I think it's great that, we have teams that do a great job of, kind of taking advantage of the rules, because that's what they are. But that's one thing I'm really looking forward to, is that implementation of the shot clock. I mean, you look at what teams are doing around the world and how kids are playing with shot clocks when they're younger. And, obviously at the college level and pro level, they're playing with shot clocks. And I'm just really looking forward to that, because, we talk about preparing our kids for the future. Of course, all kids don't play in college, but we want to play modern basketball, and we want kids to be actual basketball players. And, being an actual basketball player, playing modern basketball needs to be with a shot clock. And so that's something I'm really looking forward to. And, honestly, I don't think it'll affect the first 3 quarters of the game, because I think most teams shoot the ball within the first 20, 25 seconds. But I think it'll cause, it's going to make coaches better, and it's going to make players better, because at the end of the game, when you get to the last, 4 minutes of crunch time, and, you're down by 7 or 8, game's not going to be over. It's going to really, I think, reinvigorate kids when it comes to the end of game situations. Because you guys know, when you get to that time, let's say you're down 12 with 3 minutes to go, 4 minutes, the game's usually over, especially if you're playing against a team that's competent, but now, no. Or when we get to the shot clock, that it's not going to be over. I mean, you can literally come back and have a legitimate chance. And when you're in the huddle and you're talking to kids, say, hey man, we got a chance. Let's go. Let's go. Like, no, we really do have a chance, because these dudes got to shoot the ball in 30 seconds. So, that's something I'm really looking forward to. It's going to force everybody to be better. It's going to force kids to be better. It's going to force coaches to be better, and, not sit on the ball and not cause the opposing coach to, oh, we got to foul or do this. So I don't know. I'm always interested to hear other guys' point of view and thoughts on that. What do you guys think?
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, ideal, we have shot clock in college anyway. So, I mean, you're right. It does allow you strategy wise to do some different things. And, you got to think about it. We look at a lot for, 2 for 1, right? Try to steal an extra possession, end of the game, you got to decide, okay, well, do we have enough time left? To foul, you can stretch that out and still get a possession if you get a stop. Different things you gotta think about. But yeah, you're right. It does allow you to have a chance to come back in games. Where you're down 8, 9 points. Well, you can still chip away at that, because you're gonna get the ball back. Obviously you need to get stops and you need to make baskets and things like that. But I look at the shot clock too more defensively. I think you can do a lot of things defensively to disrupt offensive rhythm.
Absolutely.
To put teams in situations where now they got to make a decision with some time left to figure out what's going on. where they might not be organized to do that or have the skill to do it necessarily, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been now coaching in high school for a long, oh my God, 15 years maybe. And I also coached in college as well. And I just think I think the thing that you said, coach, is so important that I don't think a lot of people are discussing, which is how much better it's going to make us as coaches, situationally, uh, parts of the court, understanding like, hey, the ball went out of bounds. There's 7 seconds left on the shot clock in the second quarter. What are you looking for? Or, whatever the situation may be. I think it's just going to make us so much better situationally as coaches. And I think that's the underrated part. I think we all keep thinking of, the shot selection and getting shots in 35 seconds and whatever. I think it's going to be more those who as a coach is more prepared situationally, like, okay, there's this much time left in the shot clock against a 1-3-1 or against a 2-3 or against the man or against a three-quarter court press or whatever. I think it's just going to make us so much better situationally. And I think that's a really underrated part. And I think it's going to really separate some coaches from some others.
Absolutely, absolutely right. And like I said, that's why we get paid the small bucks to figure those things out.
All right, last segment here, quick hitters, just kind of fun, rapid fire questions. First one, all of us with Coach AAU have good stories, good or bad, but what is one of your better AAU coaching stories?
Yeah, I got two. I'll go with them pretty quick. The first one, we were out in Vegas. I think it's like big time tournament, and I had a really good team, full package. We had a kid, Matt Vogrich, who went to Michigan, Douye Dukin, Wisconsin, Vontae Doherty. We were pretty good. And so one of our games, and Steve Pratt's on the bench, and he's like, "Hey guys, all right, let's go." Blah blah blah, getting everybody hyped up. And one of the other team's best players, makes a basket, and Steve's like, "Okay, no, don't worry about it. We don't have to guard him." And then we're like, "Oh, no, Steve. No, that's one of the best players in the country, Steve." And this kid was Lance Stevenson.
Right.
Lance Stevenson was with the New York Gauchos. And so, we called a timeout, and then we went into like a box and one situation on Lance Stevenson. And then we promptly went on to like it was like a 22-4 run on these guys. And we end up like destroying them by 30. But the fact that he didn't even know who Lance Stevenson was. And he was one of the top players, like top 5 players in the country coming out, was just, hilarious. One other thing, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I thought it not cut off. All right, next story was we were out in California this same year after we were done in Vegas. We went out and played this team, and the team was like a total like monstars, 6'7", 6'9", 6'10", 6'4". We had a good sized team with Douye. We had Brian Fabrizis, who ended up playing college ball. He's like 6'10". And we score our basket. Then they take the ball out. And then the 6'10 kid brings it up. 6'10 kid, I don't know if this name ever rings a bell to you guys. Kid was named Renardo Sidney, who was 6'10, probably like 260. The kid played point guard the whole game and diced us up. He ended up having like 34, 19, and 10 as a 6'10", 260-pound kid. Like he was the best high school kid I'd ever seen in my life. Renardo Sidney. Never forget the name. He ended up playing at Mississippi State. But it was just terrifying seeing a 6'10", 260-pound point guard.
All right. I always like these ones too. So best memory as a college basketball player at Beloit.
Yeah, so my first year at Beloit did not start. Played sparingly. Second year, same thing until we got to about the middle of the year. And then we had a couple kids go down due to injury, just short term. Then I end up starting. This was a game at Carroll College in Waukesha. So, I'm super excited. I called my parents like, "Hey, yeah, coach said I'm going to start because so and so is out." And so then we go out and opening tip, and my matchup is a kid who was at Carroll who had literally just transferred from, in Beloit College D3 and, Carroll D3. But Carroll had just gotten a transfer from the University of Wisconsin who was 6'9", 270 pounds, who I had to match up against. I'm a three. I'm a three. And I had to play up a position because we were missing guys. So I had to guard this guy the whole game. And then I promptly got in foul trouble in the first minute of the game trying to guard a 6'9" kid. But the kid, yeah, he ended up terrorizing us. And I almost like had a broken jaw because the kid elbowed me a couple times. And I was like, okay, I don't know if coach, I don't need to start anymore. I'm good, coach.
Right. Jump right in. Here you go. Here you go. All right. So, you're not thinking about basketball. You're going to take a little break. What's your off-season activity? What are you going to do? What are you going to, what's you going to work on?
Yeah, so I'm really big into binge watch. Actually, I'm looking for something to binge watch right now. Really big into, finding something on Netflix, and if I find an episode or two of something, I'll get right into it. Really big into CSI. I'll do CSI episodes, or I've done the Power series on I forget the network that it's on, but the Powers, which has been on for like 6 or 7 years. I think it's on Stars. Stars. They have Power, they have 50 Cent's got like three different spin-off shows, Power Force. So, I get into watching one or two of those episodes. They normally turn into like five or six. So as long as, my kids are occupied with doing something, then I'll sit down and I'll get to like five or six of those type of binge watching episodes and stay clear of basketball.
So you talked a lot about the influence of your brother. So, but I'm curious if you had to pinpoint one main lesson you've learned from your brother about coaching, what would it be?
Gotta have players. I think every coach would
Write
tell you.
that down.
Every coach will tell you that. We look at the history of the game and, all these teams that win, and they win because they have dudes. I mean, we can look at last night and why Bennett Academy, they've got a couple Division I players, 6'9" and 7 foot. And so, you got to get guys, at the end of the day. I mean, when we first started at St. Mel, we didn't have the personnel that was currently there wasn't there, wasn't, super talented, so we went out and got a 6'8" kid and got a 5 kid, got us a regional championship. But, you got to have your guys, and then you got to have your guys that buy into what you're doing too. They got to believe in you, and then they got to believe that, they got to have the ultimate confidence in themselves, but they're only going to have that confidence in themselves if you empower them. So I remember when he was coaching at IIT, he was the head coach at Illinois Institute of Technology, which is on 35th Street in Chicago. He had a kid when he had first gotten there who was pretty good, 6'5" kid, and I think he was like second in their conference in scoring, but he literally told all his kids, like, nobody's taking a shot or looking at the basket until this kid touches the ball. And so, you got to empower your best guys to be guys. And so you got to get them, and then you got to empower them. And then, hopefully they lead you to where you're trying to go.
All right, so I think this is a good question for you because you had your Indiana experience as well, and college experience and AAU experience. What's the best gym you coached at? Or maybe a couple favorite gyms when you went there, you're like, oh man, this is cool, or this is the best atmosphere we had.
Oh, in Carmel, Indiana, it's a really good one. Like I said, that's where Josh McRoberts went. We went there, we got throttled by, I think, darn near 30. So not a great experience, but it was fun being in the gym. Castle in Indiana, I think that's the largest gym. We were there for a shootout where we played I think we played Cathedral, which is another one of the top high schools in Indiana. So like I said, we went there, played there. Um, Another good venue, which is underrated actually, is North Central. So North Central in Indiana, where Eric Gordon went. Anybody remember? They played actually Jordan's kid on TV,
Yeah.
Marcus Jordan.
Yep.
But we played those guys, and this was like on a Saturday morning. It was a Saturday afternoon game, and there was like nowhere to sit on a Saturday afternoon game, like Saturday afternoon, and this is what it is. I'm like, this is unbelievable. And then Eric Gordon promptly went off and scored 45 on us and went 10 out of 12 from the three, so that made it
Yeah.
even more memorable.
So all I'm hearing is Indiana basketball is the place to be.
I'm telling you, I went up there to I was at East Central Chicago for as I mentioned before, my buddy Chris Bugs. They were in a playoff game last Saturday. It was a sectional final game, and I mean it's one of the best gyms you'll see, top to bottom, seating both sides, seating behind the baskets like a mini arena. And I mean the place was just amazing. And I had just kind of wrapped up my season. And I was like, man, I miss this place. I miss Indiana. This is unbelievable stuff, and it was Gary Westside. I think the other school was from Plymouth, but it was unbelievable atmosphere. And like I said, I always, try to get back every year to see a game. I was at a game at Gary Westside too earlier this year, watching Bugs' team play. It's another good gym. It's another good gym to watch if you guys get a chance. Gary Westside, which is not far from Chicago area.
And then we got one more for you. What's maybe a trend in coaching or something new that you're looking into a little bit?
A trend that I'm looking into. Huh. I think it's, your team getting your team out of town and playing, not just, I talked earlier about playing shootouts, but getting your team and playing in like different states and having them have a different feel for, what other states basketball is like. I know that's something that, guys at like Whitney Young and even Lou Adams at Rich. He's done this quite a bit, taking his team out of town and played. I think saw something about he played in 10 shootouts. But I think getting your team and getting them to see different competition and different styles. And then obviously when they're out of town, they get a chance to bond and learn about each other. And so, that's something we're looking to do this year, getting our team somewhere that's not getting us to a state we're not touching. So we don't need to go to Indiana. It'd be nice to go to Indiana, but maybe going somewhere else like a Michigan or going to Iowa and just getting a feel for what that type of basketball is like and getting away from here and giving our kids that experience.
Well, Coach, we really appreciate your time today. There was a lot of fun, a lot of good stories, and I know our listeners will really enjoy it. So thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure. You guys do a really good job here. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and hopefully we can talk again at some point.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in partnership with the IBCA. Please be sure to rate us on whatever platform you are listening and give us a 5-star rating. For more show content and updates, please follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout. As always, thank you for listening. Tune in next time for more content on the court, off the court, and anything in between.